Hey guys, so today I want to share with you secret tips that can help you get great marks in Matric. So if you're in Matric, make sure that you watch this video till the end. Or if you're in high school in general, make sure that you watch this video till the end because I'm going to be sharing jam-packed value. So I'm going to be sharing secret tips that can help you become one of the Matric top achievers. You see those ones you usually see on TV shaking hands with the Minister of Basic Education. I'm going to give you tips to help you get there. All the tips that I'm going to share here are from personal experience. So I've used them myself and they've helped me to get a chance to shake hands with the Minister of Basic Education when I was invited back in my year to the Matric Awards ceremony. So first things first, it's not too late to get great marks in Matric. So if you're in grade 12 and you've not been performing fairly well throughout the year, it's not too late to get distinctions or 100% in your final mark. So usually how the Matric final mark is calculated is it's made up of 25% of the SBA, which are your school-based assessments, and then 75% of final exam, right? So your school-based assessments, all of them, that means throughout the year you're working for 25%. And in that final exam, you're working for 75%. So as you can see, the final exam weighs more than the school-based assessments. But I'm not saying the school-based assessments are not important. They are important, but it's just that if you're able to nail that exam, then you can guarantee yourself a good mark. But how do you nail that exam, right? It comes back to you preparing well throughout the year, working consistently throughout the year. So as long as you work consistently throughout the year, sometimes your marks cannot show, right? You might not be performing fairly well in those school-based assessments, those tests, your prelims. Even if you were preparing well, even if you were consistent, right? But trust me or not, when you get to that final exam, all the hard work is going to pay off. So make sure that you're consistent throughout the year so that you're learning, right? You so obsessed with learning the process, learning the principles. And then by the end of the year, when you write that final exam, make sure that you go all in and you make sure that you get great marks, right? So that's the first thing first. And another thing that most people don't know is in your final exam, if your mark is higher than your SBA, right? Let's say your SBA, all the assessments that you wrote during the year, it was 40%, right? You got 40%, which is going to be obviously weighted down to 25%, but you got 40%. And then in your final exam, you got 100%. So if there's a 10% difference between your SBA and your final mark, your final exam mark, then they just gonna put your final exam mark in your certificate, right? So if you've not been performing well throughout the year and in your final exam you get a high mark which has a 10% difference to your school-based assessments, they're gonna scrap your school-based assessment and then they're gonna put a final mark based on your mark in the exam. So it's not too late to get those great marks in Matric, right? So make sure that you work consistently and apply the tips that I'm about to share now in order to make sure that you nail those prep and the final exam so that you get the distinctions and then you're invited to the Matric Awards ceremony by the Minister of Basic Education. So first things first, let's talk about subject specific tips, right, or resources that you can use for each of the subjects. So I'm just going to be sharing tips and resources you can use for the subjects that I did because I used these resources as well. So let's start with English FAL. So I did English FAL in high school and it was an interesting subject because from grade 10 or even from secondary school all the way to grade 11, I've never ever gotten a distinction in English, because it used to be one of those subjects whereby we'll just neglect it, right? Exam time, that's when you're like, okay, cool, let me just go through it real quick and then go right, because it's one of those easy subjects. It's like, hello, you don't take it serious until it's like exam time. And even in exam time, you don't really prepare, you just go right and hope for the best. So I've never gotten a distinction in English. I'd get your 60s, I'd get your 70s. So it was usually my lowest subject throughout my school journey, right? My high school journey, my secondary school journey. But when I got to grade 12, I was like, let me approach it in a different light, right? I always preach this thing of being ahead of the curriculum in grade 12, and how you do it is you choose a few of the subjects that you find easy or interesting, the ones that you can learn on your own, and try to stay ahead in them. And since English is one of the simplest subjects, like your LO, then it's easier for you to do it alone, and make sure that you work consistently to stay ahead of the curriculum or stay ahead of the teacher. So okay, cool. So every week I'll make sure that I do English maybe like once a week or 2 times a week, right? It's either I read a poem, I do English paper 2, or I do a question paper in English paper 1, or I just do anything so that I can be ahead of the curriculum, right? So here's my tip on how to ace English paper 2. So let's start with paper 1. Paper 1, that's when you have your comprehension, your summary, your cartoon. You have to analyze a cartoon, and then language, right? So the best resource you can use for English paper 1 is the Mind the Gap study guide, right? So go to Google, search Mind the Gap English file, grade 12 study guide, and go to the Department of Education's website, download the study guide, because it's going to help you how to answer comprehension questions, how to make a summary, how to analyze a poem, your advert, and whatever visual picture they give you. Number 3, it's also going to help you. It's also going to help you on how to answer your language questions. So it's going to teach you some tips there and there on language and how to answer them. So make sure that you work consistently. Just read through that study guide. It's not long, it's short. So make sure that at least once a week you're reading through that study guide in order to understand how to answer paper 1 questions. And then as you're reading through the study guide, let's say now you're done with reading the comprehension part, what you can do is you can move and do past question papers now. Download past question papers in paper 1. Make sure that you do them, you mark for yourself. And as you do that, you learn and you become better. And trust me, in the final exam, you're going to nail or ace English paper 1. Let's talk about paper 2, which was my favorite, right? So in English paper 2, that's when you do literature. So in my school, what we did is we did poems, and we also did short stories in English. So I used to love English paper 2 because it's some form of art, like poetry is art, and I love art, right? So I used to read the short stories and poems for entertainment. So whenever I'm bored, or whenever I feel like I don't want to do heavy lifting in terms of doing a technical course such as maths, what I do is I'll go to English paper 2. So what I'll do, let me give you the framework you can use for English paper 2, right? So in English paper 2, what you want to do, I'm going to make an example with poems. So in English paper 2, the framework is start by reading the poem, right? So you'll read the poem. So usually in English paper 2, your short story, your poems, they have a lot of figurative language, especially poems. They have a lot of figurative language, meaning that you won't understand them the first time you read that poem. But make sure that you read until the end, even though you don't understand what they're talking about. You're going to have some sort of thoughts, maybe they're talking about this, maybe the poet is talking about this, but just read until the end. And when you're done reading that poem, what I want you to do is, you can even read it twice, right? Because poems are usually short. And then after reading the poem, the second step is you go to Google, search the poem title and line by line analysis. So what do I mean? So go to Google. Let's say, for example, you are reading Sonnet 18 by Shakespeare. So go to Google, search Sonnet 18 line by line analysis. And then as you scroll down, or your top results, what you're going to find there is you'll find documents or sites whereby they'll analyze the poem line by line. So they'll break down each line and tell you what it means, what each word means in each line, which will help you understand the poem better. Even if you're thinking the poet was talking about a different thing, now you'll have light on what the poem was really talking about. Make sure that you read that analysis. Usually it's documents, which is nice. You can download them to your device and make sure that whenever you want to revise, you come back to them. But they'll analyze the poem line by line, and make sure that you make notes as well in your textbook, right? Using a pencil, obviously, just make notes. Okay, this line is about this. And then after that, in some of the sites and some of the documents, they also analyze your theme, your mood, your tone of the poet, and all those kind of things. All these things are things that they can ask in the exam. So you reading this document, this analysis is going to help you understand the poem, and then after help you answer the exam questions much better and get 100% in English paper 2. And when you do the poem in class with the teacher, make sure that you discuss, right? Because now you already know what the poem is about. Make sure that you engage in the discussion so that you know how to kind of like weight your answers when you're discussing the poem, which is going to help you when you write in that final exam or test. So make sure that you discuss and you just engage in the conversation. And yeah, you can do the same thing with your short stories. You just go to Google and say this short story analysis, and then you go get documents, you get sites whereby they analyze to you what the short story is about. They'll tell you what's the theme, what's the mood, the different scenes, they analyze the characters and all those kind of things. So make sure that you use the cheat code, because it's really going to help you nail paper 2. And coming to paper 3, I feel like paper 3 is about practicing. I always say try to nail paper 3 from grade 10. So make sure that whenever you're writing a poem or you're writing creative writing, right? Whenever you're writing creative writing, what you want to do is you want to put in your all. So put in your all, accept feedback from the teachers, make sure that you proofread your work, and then by doing that, it's more of like a skill. You'll get better. So from grade 10, make sure that you're always putting in your best and you're always getting feedback so that you can become better at that thing. And what I found is when you master paper 2, meaning that when you master literature, other people's writing, when you come to paper 3, it tends to be easy for you to also write creative work, because you kind of like have a picture or an idea of how great people out there used to write their own creative writing. Because poems, your short stories, those are all creative work. So paper 3 will be easy if you master paper 2, but make sure that in paper 3 you also put in your all and you're always trying to improve as a person. So now let's go to maths. I know when I say maths, most people are probably saying you're the most difficult subject ever. I know in high school, maths probably has the most bashed subject in high school, but maths is not as difficult, right? I know most people are gonna hate me for this. Most people are gonna come to the comment section, pledging maths is so difficult. But let me tell you why I think maths is not difficult. So if grade 12, grade 10, grade 11, if you take 7 past question papers, put them side by side, and then you compare them, you'll see that more than 80% of the things that they ask are the same. So with maths, what they ask doesn't change. They can change the numbers. In solve for x, this year it can be solve 2x minus 1 is equal to 9. Next year it can be 3x minus 2 is equal to 10. But they change the numbers, but the process that you use to solve that question doesn't change. So that's why I'm saying all the questions, more than 80% of the question papers are the same. So whatever they're asking is the same. They don't change it. And they recycle questions sometimes, even your high order questions, those questions that they're saying these questions are only going to be answered by a few students, those top performing students, and we're trying to challenge them as well. They also recycle them sometimes. They'll recycle them from the past question papers that even though it's a high order question, but if you've been practicing, you'll probably have seen a similar question before and you can follow the same process and get to the answer. So that's why I'm saying maths is simple. If it doesn't change, then the cheat code is master the process for each of the questions. And by doing that, you're going to nail maths. So let me give you an example. Solve for x. Doesn't change, right? So if you practice solve for x until you get 100% whenever you do solve for x, then it's guaranteed that when you write your final exam, you're going to get 100% in solve for x. So with maths, it's not usually it's usually an understanding issue, understanding the process. So make sure that you get a good teacher or a good tutor. If you can't do it yourself and understand, if you can't read the textbook and understand, make sure that you get a good teacher and a good tutor if possible. And one resource I used to use in maths, one textbook, which is one of my best textbooks, right? And I feel like it helped me to understand maths better in grade 12, was Mind Action Series, this blue textbook. So you can search it online. I've made a video on TikTok where I mention how you can download Mind Action Series online, right? You can go online and search Mind Action Series textbook PDF, and pull out the PDF and use that PDF. Or you can buy the actual textbook. I had the actual textbook back in my yes, because what I like about it is they'll give you examples, and the examples are in difficulty order. So they'll start with the easiest examples and progress until they get to those hard examples. And even their questions, they divide them and say, okay, cool, these are the okay questions, and then at the end they say these are the most difficult questions. So if you can do those questions, then you've mastered this topic. So make sure that you get Mind Action Series as a textbook. Economics and Business Studies. So with economics, the only resource that you need to nail economics in grade 12 is your study guide, your Mind the Gap study guide. So go to Google again, search Mind the Gap study guide and download that study guide. If you picked it up now, all the resources that you need to nail grade 12 are literally online. So if you can go and search, do your research, you can find all the resources online. So after downloading the Mind the Gap study guide, you need to put in at least 30 minutes each day. Even if it's not each day, maybe like let's say 4 hours a week, right, on economics, reading your study guide or reading your study guide, your Mind the Gap study guide. And what's nice about the Mind the Gap study guide is it's simplified. So they're basically giving you what you need for that exam. So they give you a topic and it's in point form, right? So what I usually do is give you a topic. Let's say now you're doing your markets, your different markets. Obviously you have your perfect market, and in your perfect market they give you the different subtopics, which are your characteristics of the perfect market. And then in each subtopic they give you maybe like 8 points, 7 points. So what I usually do is I'll just try and understand all the points. With economics I'll try and understand all the points, but if there's a difficult point I can ignore it. As long as I have 4 to 5 points that I understand and understand the process, then it's much easier for me to go and discuss it in an exam or test, right? So make sure you understand the process in economics, understand the assumptions, understand whatever you're reading. It's not a cramming game, it's about understanding, because once you understand what you're doing, once you understand what the assumptions are there, then you can perform better in economics. But business studies, on the other hand, is you can understand, and I advise you to understand. But with business studies, it's really about you memorizing most of those points. So another resource you can use in business studies, go to Google, search business studies, grade 12 notes, and then you'll find a number of notes. And those notes are also summarized in point form. So they'll give you, okay, cool, now we're talking about the different legislations out there, right? Labor Relations Act. And then they give you, okay, cool, these are the subtopics. Under each subtopic, they give you maybe let's say 8, 9 points, 10 points. Just look for 4, 5 or 6 easy points that you can cram under each subtopic. And after cramming those 4 to 6 points, I know I said cram, but not really cram, but memorize. So after memorizing those 4 to 6 points, what you can do is you can just sit down and try to write down whatever you've been trying to read or memorize. Just write it down without referring to the notes and see how much you can remember, and then compare it again to the points that you chose in the notes. You can highlight the points that you chose so that you compare it and say, okay, cool, I remember this point, this point, this point. I didn't remember this one, and just add it to the red pen. And by doing that, you're exercising your muscles, so the next time you get that type of question again, whether it's in essay form or not, you can easily just write it down. You can easily remember most of the points because you've tried practicing writing it down without referring to the notes before, and you saw where you went wrong and then you updated it. And with business studies, the more you practice, man, just pick up any question paper and say, okay, cool, I'm just going to do it blind, and just try to write and see how much you remember, and then refer to the notes. Master economics and business studies. So economics, make sure that you understand the process. Business studies, make sure that you memorize 4 to 6 points and try to write it down without referring to the notes. And lastly but not least, on the 2 subjects, in fact, all other subjects you do in Matric, try to teach whatever you've learned to someone else. So if you try to teach whatever you've learned to someone else, that's when you get to gauge whether you understand that thing or not, right? Because if you don't understand something, you can't explain it But once you can explain something, that means you understand it, and that will help you remember it on a future date. It will help you memorize that thing, because when you do that exam or test, you can easily say, "Oh, I remember I explaining to someone and I said this and this and this and this and this." So make sure that you teach something to someone. Yeah, so that's it for today. I shared tips on maths, English, basic studies, and economics. Drop a comment if you want tips on any other subject, or just drop a comment if you have any question in general and you want me to address something in my next video. I'll definitely be happy to make a video on it. But for now, make sure that you like this video, you comment, and then you subscribe, turn on the notification bell so that you're notified next time I drop. Cheers.